I'm supposed to talk about squad goals, and I didn't do a thorough study of the Bible, but I can say this with about 97.3% certainty that term is not in the Bible. But there are a lot of other terms in the Bible that apply to this that are like that. A lot of times in the New Testament particularly, they talk about body life. So if you ever run into anything in Scripture that talks about the body of Christ, and we're not talking about the body of Christ, we're talking about the group, like student body, the body. Okay, that's what it's talking about. So what I want to propose to you is that this is a worthy topic for our examination. Because if it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for Jenny Claire, amen? Okay, and if it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. So did y'all know, that Jesus didn't just come out of the womb, come out of the manger and have at it. He spent 30 years doing other stuff. But then when he got to be about 30 years old, he started his public ministry. You know what the first thing he did before he began his public ministry, or as he began his public ministry? The answer is not have business cards made. He did not buy a briefcase. What he did was he gathered to himself his squad. He chose 12 people. He called them to himself. Throw that Mark passage up on the screen, if you will. Look at this. He appointed the 12, Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges. I don't know how you say that. B. That is sons of thunder. Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James, the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus and Simon the Zealot. Oh, and there's one more. I didn't put 19 up there. 19 says, and Judas Iscariot. So if you count, I'll just say to the counting. There were 12. Okay, Judas was up there. He didn't deserve to be put up there anyway. Right, yeah, so there. But anyway, a lot of times in Scripture when we come upon these big lists of names, our eyes just glaze over and we just kind of yeah, whatever. But I don't want us to do that tonight. I want us to look at this for a second because I think we can learn some stuff from it that'll have something to do with your life and mine. First of all, I said that at the beginning of his ministry, Jesus chose 12. Well, I don't know if you remember, but the last, not the last night, but almost one of the last nights he was around, when Jesus had to go to Gethsemane and when he was arrested, he also took some of his boys with him. He took 3. So y'all, if the God of the universe needed a squad, needed some boys, how much more do you and I need some people? Okay. So what do we learn about Jesus, or what do we learn about maybe what we should be like in terms of assembling our squad? Well, first of all, I don't know if you know this, but Simon, the first one that's mentioned, actually we call him Peter all the time now. Jesus gave him that name later. Simon, and then the number 4th one, Andrew, which I've always thought was kind of ironic because guess what? Andrew met Jesus first. Andrew met him first, and then he went and got his brother and dragged him and said, hey, I've met, the guy that might be the Messiah. So, but poor little Andrew, he always gets 4th billing, and Peter gets top billing, but that's okay. They were brothers. And then James and John, those 2 guys were brothers. And all 4 of those guys were fishermen. So what we learn is some of the guys who were called and hung out with Jesus for 3.5 years knew each other pretty well. They had some close relationships. Others worked together. The fishermen, those 4 guys were fishermen. We don't know a lot about the about these other guys in and what, if they knew each other beforehand or not. But certainly when you were living with somebody, for 3.5 years, you get to know them pretty well. But in the beginning, some of them were probably strangers. But the two that I really want to zoom in on right now is Matthew. Anybody know anything about Matthew? He's one that we actually do know a good bit about. Does anybody know anything about Matthew? Anybody know what his profession was? He was a tax collector. Now, in those days, y'all, hey Matthew, yeah, and not Hurricane Matthew, the disciple Matthew, he was a tax collector. And in those days, tax collectors were very hated people. Anybody ever heard of the IRS? What does the IRS stand for? Internal Revenue Service. Do you think if you worked for the IRS, you'd want that to be your opening line if you were trying to pick up a girl?
Yeah.
Hi, I work for the IRS. Probably not. Because people who are connected with having to pay taxes are not really popular people. And even more so because the Jews were a minority. And the government was Rome. Well, the Roman Empire. But Rome was the seat of the government, and Matthew, who was a Jew, was probably seen as sort of a sellout because he was working for the government, and the Jews didn't like the government. Plus, tax collectors did not have a very good reputation because a lot of them, not all maybe, but a lot of them were super corrupt. While I'm taking taxes, I may as well take more than I need, and put it right here in the old back pocket, right? So Matthew, tax collector. And then there's Simon the Zealot. What's a zealot? Huh? Zeal. You know what zeal means? Passion. So a zealot is somebody who's very passionate. In this case, the zealots were a group of Jewish people who hated Rome. And in fact, they would just love to overthrow Rome. So how do you think those two got along? What do you think those two thought about each other? The guy who's working for Rome and the guy who wants to overthrow Rome? Not exactly peas in a pod. Not exactly fast friends. And yet, here they are in this circle. So y'all, when we're little kids, I don't know if you've seen little kids on a playground lately or if you remember being a little kid on a playground, but when you're little, you'll play with anybody, right? You don't even have to know their name. Hey, want to swing with me? Hey, want to play? As you get older, you get a little more picky about your friends, and that's a good thing. Now, here's the deal. You've learned that you can't be friends with everybody, and that you do need to be picky. I'm a school counselor, and I always tell new kids when they're coming in, I work at a middle school, and I'm like, take your time making friends. Everybody will want to be your friend in the beginning, but you need to scope it out and see which kids are like you, or see which kids share your values, or whatever. And so it's very normal that we gravitate in a room like this, that we gravitate toward people who are like us. It's very normal that we end up developing deep relationships with people with whom we have a lot in common. And that's good. But when you think about it, and I want you to think for just a minute about if you're in a small group, think about that group. Some of those people you probably asked to be in a small group with. Others, not so much. But I just want you to know that everybody in this room potentially could be somebody that can get you farther on the road toward heaven. Everybody in this room potentially has something that they could teach you. I became a Christian when I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college, and I quickly started going to a church called Westover. Yeah, I've been here forever. So, but when I didn't grow up in a church like Westover. In the church where I grew up, they didn't even, I think they would like read a passage from the Bible and then shut the Bible, and they would never talk about it at all. And, they didn't really talk a lot about Jesus. And so when I became a Christian, everybody I knew who also loved Jesus and who wanted to be like Jesus and who had a relationship with Jesus. That's also something that I never heard about growing up at the church. And I went to church every day. Every Sunday since I was 18 days old. But they just didn't talk about that stuff. So I didn't know anything about having a relationship with the Lord until I got to 19 in college. And so everybody I knew who had a growing relationship with Christ was like my age. And I have 3 snapshots that are deeply imprinted on my brain from those years, those 3 years that I was, well, not in this building, but at the old building where Westover used to meet. One day, I was in the bathroom, and I was just listening to, because what else are you going to do while you're in the bathroom? There were these women who were at the sink, and they were washing their hands, and I overheard them. And they were talking to each other about how God had been working in their lives. And like He had answered prayer. And I was like, who's that talking? And I opened the stall, and I sort of expected to be seeing like some college-age kid, because that's all I knew. These women were old. They were probably 35 or something. And I was just amazed. See, these women, I didn't know it, but they were part of my squad, because they go to my church. And I don't know who they were. I don't know their names. I hope I get to meet them in heaven. I think God could arrange that. Lord, I want to meet those ladies in heaven. Okay, it's set. So, but I was like, oh, cool. When I get to be their age, I can still have a growing relationship with God, and He can still teach me stuff. Because I didn't know that. It opened my eyes to the possibilities. Then I remember one Sunday I'm sitting there, and they're collecting the offering. And there's this cute little old, and I do mean old, bald, glasses, little short, little pudgy, little round dude. And he's passing the offering plate, and I take it, and I look at that man, and you know what was on his face? Joy. It was joy. It was just there. I named it right away. And what I have learned from that man, who's part of my squad, if I don't know his name, Lord, I want to meet him too in heaven. He was serving the Lord. Now, y'all might not think that takes a whole heck of a lot of talent or struggle or sacrifice to pass an offering plate. But somebody's got to do it, right? And that man, as old as he was, and seriously, I'm talking senior citizen, like, not senior citizen 55, you could join ARP when you, whatever. But he was getting on up in years. And he was still serving the Lord. And he found joy in it. And I was like, okay, so if I serve the Lord, maybe I can have a joyful face like that dude. And people who don't even know me will see my joy. So I learned that from my squad dude, little old squad dude. And then I remember there was Glenn, the guy that I was very interested in. And later actually dated, amazingly enough. Now in those days we didn't have the worship songs and the guitars and the words on the screen. We had hymnals. Anybody ever go to church with a hymnal? Yeah. Okay, so we had hymnals. And so I would notice, obviously I would, walk into church and, what am I doing? I'm scanning the room to see if Glenn's there. Keeping it real, right? Yeah. Don't tell me, girls, you never scan the room to see if that boy's here. You do. Y'all do it too, boys. Check out the girls. Anyhow, I saw Glenn, and you know what? Every time I would walk in, because he was more punctual than I was, and when I saw Glenn, you know what he was doing? Because it wasn't, the service had not started yet. Glenn was sitting there, and open on his lap was a hymnal. And you know what he was doing? He was worshiping. There was no music. There was nobody up there. The service hadn't started. But he was using the words of those hymns to focus his attention on his God. And I learned that just sitting in church doesn't mean you worship. Next time I went to a Christian bookstore, I bought myself a hymnal. It's still sitting, the same one I got it kind of taped up, but it's still sitting beside my chair. You come to my house, I'll show you. And I still take it and I open it from time to time and I worship because it helps me see God. So you can learn things from people in this room, in this building, whether you know their names or not. They've got things to teach you. Y'all, do you talk about the things that you have in common with the people with whom you have them in common? One of my coworkers and I both like baseball. And so we talk about baseball because we have that in common. You have in common with some kid back there that maybe you don't even know their name, that you both are Jesus lovers. You're followers of Jesus. And I loved what Anna Grace said in the video, that she was a fan of God, but not a follower. I hope you're not just a fan. But if you are, look around. Find some people, or just one, who you think is a follower, and you can learn from that person. Do you talk about the Lord with the people that, I see some of you and you are sitting together with the same person you sat with last week. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But I'm guessing y'all are pretty tight. And I'm wondering, do you both love the Lord? And if you do you talk about Him with each other? Sadly, I found out yesterday, one of my friends she's a co-worker, and she hasn't been at work this whole year. And she had lost somebody who was really close to her, and so she's just really struggled with that, having to settle the estate and all. And so I thought that's why she hadn't been back to work yet. And then I found out yesterday that her office had been cleaned out. And so I went to see another friend of hers, somebody that is closer to her than I am. And she told me that she has breast cancer. But, this woman that I was talking to yesterday, she and I aren't that close. But because she's close to Debbie and I'm close to Debbie, that kind of makes a little triangle. So she and I are closer when we talk about the person we have in common. That should happen to you if you're talking to somebody, if you're in a relationship with somebody, or just chatting with somebody. You learn things like that. I remember one time I was just having a normal, ordinary conversation with Donna Miller, Pastor Don's wife. And Donna Miller was just telling me something that had been going on in her life, and she said, and so the other day, I was vacuuming while she said, I was praying while I was vacuuming, and blah, blah, and I don't know what blah, blah, blah was. I have no idea what she said after that. All I heard was, I was praying while I was vacuuming. And I went, why don't I pray when I vacuum? I mean, that was just, do you think Donna Miller woke up that morning and said, Lord, help me to tell Susan that I was vacuuming, praying while I was vacuuming because she needs to know that? No. It just flowed out of her relationship, her natural relationship with the Lord. It just flowed out of her. It was as normal as breathing to say that. What comes out of your mouth when you talk about your normal life? You never know how that's going to impact somebody. The New Testament has a lot to say about squad life. I just want to kind of give you a little assignment. If any of you need something to read tonight before you go to bed, if it's your habit to read the Bible before you go to bed, or in the morning if it's your habit. If it's not your habit to either spend a little time in God's Word before you go to bed or first thing in the morning, you can't do anything better than that. That's how you get to where you want to be. But anyway, Ephesians 4, let me just say. What did I say? Louder. Ephesians 4. Check it out. There's a bunch of good stuff in there. We don't have time to go over all that stuff, but there's a bunch of stuff. Oh, I do want to tell you one other little verse, though, that just popped into my brain. It's Proverbs 27:6. Proverbs 27:6. Proverbs what? 27:6. Proverbs has a lot to say about friendship and relationships. You ought to check that out too. And by the way, you know how many chapters are in Proverbs? Anybody know? 31. How many days are in a lot of months? 31. It's a real cool thing to take a chapter of Proverbs every day for a month and read it. Ask God to just show you one of those verses in that chapter that you read. I did a great Bible study with a friend one time, just the two of us. We lived in two different cities, but we got together from time to time. And so we would take a week, and we would, was it a week? I think it was a week. And we would study or read the same chapter in Proverbs, and then we would pick out a verse that we wanted to memorize. And sometimes we even picked the same verse. It was so cool. So that's something else you can do just for fun. But anyway, I want to show you, though, a big... Oh, no, I was going to tell you what Proverbs 27:6 said. Proverbs 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. What? A lot of Proverbs are like this, compare and contrast thing. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Now, who likes it when your friend hurts your feelings? Let me see your hand. Anybody like it when your friend hurts your feelings? No. We want our friends to build us up. We want our friends to make us feel good and happy and yay. But I'm sorry, that's not what a friend does sometimes. Sometimes a friend does what it says in Ephesians 4, which is speak the truth in love. And sometimes the truth hurts. And sometimes your friends need to tell you something that might not be easy to hear. But it's a faithful wounding. It's a faithful wounding. On the other hand, deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. Some people are all sweetie, sweetie, and it's not in your best interest. All right, last thing I want you to look at, though, is the passage in Hebrews. And we're going to have it up on the screen. And this is, as soon as I knew I was going to speak tonight, I knew I had to share these verses with you. All right, let me just get, woohoo! Ben, you know how to read. Would you read this?
I would love to. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near.
Thank you. Okay. First of all, pay attention to the little, what's that word called? Pronoun. The third word is pronoun. What is it? Us. Who's that include? Us. Okay. So what are we going to do? First of all, we're going to consider. What does that mean? Consider. It means to think about, cogitate on, meditate about, dream up, take some time, consider, figure it out, take some effort. That's what we're supposed to do when we consider. It's not just first thing pops in your brain. This let us consider means there's some effort required. There's some effort. You guys, we guys, need to put some effort into something. Now, what we got to put some effort into? What are we going to be considering? What are we going to be taking some effort and thinking about and dreaming up and figuring out? How to stir up one another. Stir up one another. Another translation says stimulate. But I like stir up. How to stir up one another. Some of y'all need some stirring up. Because you're just kind of, On some days, I need some stirring up. Because I'm just blah. I'm in a rut. I'm flat. I'm not motivated. I'm not inspired. I'm not energized. And that's how some of y'all are some days, right? Is that how you are in your relationship with the Lord? In your Christian life? Do you need to be stirred up? Some of you come here on Wednesday night for that very reason. You need to get stirred up. And you're hoping something somebody says, or something you sing, or something, I don't know, maybe just seeing somebody will stir you up. We, according to this, are responsible for other people getting stirred up. How healthy is our body, our group, our youth group, our church, your small group, your group of friends, your squad? How healthy is it going to be if people aren't stirring it up? What are we stirring each other up to? To love and good works. Holy cow. You mean you might be responsible for somebody else being more loving? You mean because of you, somebody might be doing some good works? It's in the Bible. God doesn't lie. If it wasn't possible, if it wasn't true, it would not be in here. So yes, the answer is yes. So here's the thing. You need to be willing to get out there. It says not neglecting to meet together. Some of y'all are so faithful at being here every Wednesday night. Some of you wouldn't dream of missing small group. Some of you wouldn't dream of not being in church on Sunday. And that's good. That's good. I got to tell you, it encourages me when I come here and I see some of you with your Bibles open. It encourages me on a Sunday morning when I see that person sitting next to me taking notes. It encourages me when I see somebody with their hands raised or their eyes closed, or you can just tell that they are worshiping. That is an encouragement to me. It says, oh, it went away. I need it back. We're not done. Because I used the E word. Not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another. Encouraging one another. So, here's the thing. How can you encourage one another? Well, you can. Let me tell you what the definition of encouraging. It means to make someone more determined, more hopeful, and more confident. You can do that. You should do that. You're supposed to do that. I'm supposed to do that. We're supposed to do that. Today, when I put the finishing touches on this message and I closed my paper, I checked my phone. You know what was on my phone? It was a text from somebody who's here tonight. Totally unexpected. I'm excited that you're teaching tonight. I'm praying for you. You talk about being encouraged. That person had never texted me before. And it rocked my world. You think that made me more confident about standing up here before y'all? You think that made me more excited? You think it made me more eager? Yes, yes, yes. I mean, I was already excited. But, it encouraged me. It filled me. It emboldened me. And y'all, you can have that effect on somebody else. If you will just let God lead you and use you, and if you will obey what He says. I gotta be honest, I do not like coming here every Wednesday night. Sometimes I get tired of it. But you know what? Those nights where I go, I come anyway because I don't want to neglect to meet together because I'm called to do this. I'm called to this ministry. I'm convinced I'm called to work with high school students. Okay? But what do I get out of it? Well, sometimes not much, but that's not the point. And some of you, and y'all know people who never come here, who never come to church, who never come to your small group. And they say, well, I don't get anything out of it. Well, I just want to challenge you that according to this, you're called to put into it. So, on those nights where I have a bad attitude, and I know none of you has ever had a bad attitude, that you would just take your little bad attitude, like I do, and confess it as sin before God, and say, take away my bad attitude. And Lord, let me say something. Show me just one person that I need to speak to tonight. And give me something to say to that person that they need to hear. Y'all, you put God to the test. He will knock your socks off. I promise. And you can come tell me about it. And I'll say, told you. All right. So the last thing I want to tell you, I don't think I told them, Michael, at the beginning about my subtopic. I don't believe I told y'all that God gave me a title for this message. And the title was you know how Michael likes to talk about food? Well, I do too. You know how Michael said, one of my favorite things, probably maybe the only thing I'll ever remember that Michael said the years he was here, is that he compared the land of milk and honey to the land of Cheerwine and Krispy Kremes. And I was like, amen. Yeah, it's just so, yeah, food, if you talk about food. Okay, so here's the deal. Fuse is an army, Fuse is a team, Fuse is a family. Fuse should be a Dairy Queen Blizzard. Yes, you heard it here first. Fuse should be a Dairy Queen Blizzard. Because if you get a Blizzard, you know how they do it, right? They turn it upside down, right? There's a lot of good stuff in that Blizzard, right? But But if you just let that blizzard sit there, just let it sit there for a while, what happens to all the good stuff? Do you know? It sinks to the bottom. You need to keep that thing stirred up. Y'all, there's a lot of good stuff in here. There's a lot of good stuff in each person here. And we need to consider how we can stir it up, how we can bring it to the surface, how we can bring it to the fore, and God will be glorified. Pray with me. Father, thank you that you modeled how to do life. You had your squad. You teach us how to pick people. You teach us how to relate to people. And then you teach us what we ought to be doing with each other. I pray, God, that you would make each of us faithful and that you would use each one of us to impact other people's lives for your sake, for your glory, for your honor. In Jesus' name, amen.